Hello and welcome back to another episode. Now today I am very excited because we're going to be conducting something of an experiment, both literally and figuratively, in so much as I've never done anything quite like this on YouTube before, but also I couldn't resist experimenting with a little item that arrived in the post this morning. A USB microscope with the ability to zoom in up to 1,000 times on whatever it is that it's pointing at is a very exciting prospect for me, at least. And also actually a very novel one, I think, in some respects, because I don't know about you, but I haven't had the opportunity to point a camera that magnifies things at anything really since high school. I could have broken into or got access maybe to a lab in uni, for example, but normally you have to be pointing these sort of things at serious items and artifacts. You can't just be going, oh, what does this look like? What does that look like? Unless you work in the lab, you know? And so today I'm going to be looking at some things that I have always been curious about. Certainly over the past 10 years I've been thinking, in particular, for example, computer game cartridges. And I'll explain why as we proceed with that. But first of all, we are starting by looking at my mouse mat. This is a sort of a Van Gogh inspired image of the Dark Knight in Gotham, and you can see the bat signal has been ignited, and in particular the microscope is pointing at a swirl in the night sky. So if I just move it for a sec, you can see the swirl there, and I'll just go back again, because I quite like the way that you can see the colour change on the microscopic image. We're currently at around about 400 times zoom, and if I just use my mouse, I can highlight, for example, you can see the yellow obviously, and the white through to the blue, and a bit of green there in the weave. You can see that this is a man-made fibre. It's very plasticky, it's very shiny, but also actually you can see these other items which have made it into the weave that, well, aren't immediately obvious to the naked eye, but also probably shouldn't technically be there. It's like this black thing that's been caught up, and this orange thing just here, this little fibre at the bottom of the screen. Now if we zoom in even closer, so let's say 1,000 times zoom, and it goes out of focal length, and it will come back in a bit. There we go, that'll do. Ooh. And I'll just turn up the light, I think, on it. Oh, that's down. There we go, that's better. Then we get even closer to the fibres, which I find very exciting indeed. Again, you can see that strange, if I just move the microscope just a touch, that strange orange fibre has made its way into the weave there. It's probably got caught up somehow. But also little bits. For example, this white thing, which can I just focus on that a bit more clearly? Yeah, this sort of magnification, even changing the dial, makes the image move. Okay, there we go. It looks like it could be a small tuft of fluff, maybe. Could be some salt, I don't know. And then this little chunk here, this orange chunk, that almost looks like toffee. I reckon that might be a little bit of food that's down there on the mat. Because obviously I have my lunch at my desk quite often. I work from home, and so who knows what's on that mouse mat? It's probably utterly disgusting. But see, we just started with the mouse mat. We started with what was immediately to hand. Let's go back out to about 400 times zoom, and let's take a look at the first item that I'm curious about, and that is my copy of The Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening on Game Boy. This is still technically my favourite Game Boy game, and also my favourite Zelda game, in fact. Even though obviously Breath of the Wild and Link to the Past and others are very good, I just love this game for various reasons, and I've always wanted to know what the plastic looks like microscopically. So let's take a look. Now, let's start with the bottom of the case, and we're going to go to the arrow that indicates which way the Game Boy cartridge should go into the machine. And I'm fascinated by the fact that you can see these little micro scratches on there, but also little bits of dirt that have caught up on the bottom of the arrow. And see this blue thing here, this blue stuff that let's move my mouse. There's actually, it seems to be melted into the plastic itself. I can't see it when I look at it with the naked eye, but here and there it seems that this plastic has these sort of impurities of different colours. You can see again where scratches have been made and dirt is caught up in those scratches as we move along to the left of the cartridge, and a bit sort of, let's see, a bit up over here. Here's another one of those colour deformities in the plastic that just seems to have been melted in at the time of moulding or forming. A couple of other dots here actually as well, just there and just there. I found that really interesting. But overall, the textured surface of the Game Boy cartridge, and it is, you can see it's textured, looks quite pleasing and relatively uniform. It's bumpy and it's lumpy, but it's not. It's clearly a close-up version of fairly high-quality plastic, as it were, that we're looking at. Now let's move over to the label. I really like this sort of stuff, and we can take a look at the made in Japan sort of registration on the side there. Oops, sorry, on the side there. Over into the gold of the logo and onto the print, and I recognise a Z with a sword going through it. Isn't that cool? You can see the tricolour the tricolour print technique, the sort of the red, is it red, green, yellow, red, green, blue, red, yellow, blue? Probably RGB actually, red, green, blue technique that they're using to print onto the cartridge. And actually it's in quite good condition. I mean, if you actually look at the cartridge, it's been well handled in its time. You can see that it's got an awful lot of thumb grease on there. I make no apologies for that. That's just simply the way that things were when I was a kid. Things got used a lot, and frankly, so they should. So let's go up to the top of the label and see if there's much of a colour difference between the greasy bit, which is, let's see, here, and then the non-greasy bit, which is, let's see, here. Yeah, it's a bit paler. There you go. Although it's not, the colour difference isn't, on a microscopic level, isn't as great as I thought it would be. Yes, okay, you can see probably elements of the dirt and the grime increasing on the label, but yeah. And then up here we have a bit more of a pristine, a bit of a scratch there with some dirt in it, but a bit more of a pristine colour spectrum on the label. That is pretty cool. And then we go back onto the plastic. There's the B in Game Boy. O, Y, I love it. TM, very cool. So, okay, that's the Game Boy cartridge. Now, I want to move on and take a look at the SNES equivalent. So we have Zelda Link to the Past there. Okay, so let's take a look at that. We're going to start with the plastic on the side, and oh, now this looks much more, well, it looks different actually, but a little bit more sort of globular, rounded globs in the makeup of this plastic, which is kind of cool. Because the SNES cartridge is textured, again, a little bit like the Game Boy cartridge, it has that sort of textured sort of feel to it. And this is clearly what the texture is on a microscopic level. Right. Again, we're getting these sort of things which are caught up in the plastic during the moulding process, like this little black fibre here, which I don't think I can see. No, I cannot see that with the naked eye. Cool. But again, I think fairly high quality plastic. The texture is quite uniform. And it's more or less actually kind of what I expected. Now here we're dropping into the canyon of the SNES cartridge just there, and you can see that the ridges there. I'll try it. Let's see if I can just focus on the ridges in the bit further away in the canyon. Oh, cool. Hang on. Yeah, look at that. Look at all that finger grease and grime, tiny little hairs and fibres that, understandably have fallen into that crevice and never come out again. But also, again, what looked like possibly little micro colour variations, like these little green dots and things like that, which again you just can't see with the naked eye. which is understandable. I mean, obviously that's what microscopes are for. Okay, let's take a look at the label now, just to focus properly. And we're focusing in on, ooh, a hair of some sort. Oh, what's that? Why is that doing there? Oh no, I can see that hair. Okay, yeah, that is just a hair which is stuck to the front of the cartridge. Cool. There we go. But actually the print quality on the SNES cartridge seems to be in some ways similar to the Game Boy cartridge, but I would say of a greater density, a higher quality possibly. The RGB isn't so obvious on this cartridge. That's an interesting observation, I think. Cool. It's the sort of thing that I was hoping to be able to see and differentiate between the different cartridges. So here we are on the Z with the shield of the logo. Let's see if we can find the sword. There it is. There's the sword coming off the bottom of the logo to the label. But again, the RGB is not so obvious on the SNES cartridge. There's a bit of RGB clarity in terms of the print. Okay, so that tells me that possibly the SNES cartridges have a better quality of print than the Game Boy cartridges. Or maybe just a different printer. Interesting. Okay, so that's a SNES cartridge. Now, actually, shall we look at this logo at 1000 zoom? Let's just zoom in and see what we can see. Oh. Okay, so at 1000, the RGB does become a bit more obvious, but it's also really quite difficult to stay still. Okay, so that's 1000 in, and you can just about see the RGB in a similar way to what you could on the Game Boy cartridge. That's kind of cool. If we zoom back out to about 400. Interesting. So we're going to continue now with another Nintendo cartridge, and that is Wave Race 64. One of my favourite N64 games, and rather than going for another Zelda game, I figured it'd be interesting to look at something with a bit more colour variation on the majority of the label. But again, we're going to start by looking at the plastic of the cartridge, and I'm curious about the quality of the plastic. Now here, compared to the SNES cartridge, the quality seems to be even more uniform, a little bit flatter actually. The globules are still there, but they're not as deep, it seems, and they're not as complete. This is much more of a sort of a micro-pitted surface. So possibly this might be a higher quality plastic, or again just a different plastic mold, or different plastic for sure, I imagine. But that's interesting to see. We have a scratch there on the surface of the cartridge. It's got some grime in it, and probably grime from teenage me playing a Wave Race 64. But also, actually, we seem to have less, or indeed no, identifiable colour variation, in so much as little objects being moulded into the plastic, like the blue or the green that we see on the Game Boy and the SNES. I'm not really seeing any of that, like plastic, I suppose, contamination. What I'm seeing is lots of grime on the surface. I mean, some of these black dots might be, I guess, plastic contamination, but it's not coloured. It's not as varied. Oh, and there we go. That seems to be a hair that might be partly, or a fibre that might be partly stuck into the plastic, just there. But I imagine this probably is just a better plastic, and obviously we all know N64 cartridges feel just that little bit more solid. So maybe this is that being demonstrated in terms of its microscopic qualities. Here we are with the Nintendo logo on the back. Oh, now on the D there, what's that? Is that grime? Do you know, I can't even see that. What is that? Let's take a look at the D. On the D, okay. That yellow thing. Should we zoom in 1000 on that? Here we go. Oh. Okay. Now that could be a tiny little fleck of something. Can you see how it's just about, seems to be almost breaking up the light a little bit? Almost like maybe a piece of, hang on. This is really hard to do. Now that is interesting. It almost looks like some sort of crystal or something. You see how it's breaking up the light a little bit in its surface. That could be a little bit of plastic contamination, but I cannot see that with my naked eye. Interesting. Okay, we'll go back out to 400. There we go. Let's take a look at the label, shall we? So here we are. Let's go straight to Wave Race 64, and oh, interesting. This looks a lot more like the Game Boy logo. Interesting. And actually, in terms of the look of it, just using my eyes, it does look more similar to the Game Boy logo in so much as it's a thinner label, I think. So maybe it is all about just the quality of the print, the quality of the label, and I guess whatever it is that Nintendo decides they're going to do. So there's the R in Wave Race, A, C, E, cool. And then let's go to the guy's green helmet. Yeah. Now I wonder what this looks like in comparison to a comic. Don't worry, I've got a comic that we're going to look at in just a second. Cool. Okay, let's look at the clouds now. Some grime there being stuck to the surface, scratches and this kind of thing. And let's look at the Nintendo seal of quality. Nice. Oh, and the N64 logo actually. Cool. Oh, I'm sorry, I can't giggle too much, otherwise I'll... Excellent. Okay, so that's Nintendo cartridges, and obviously Nintendo abandoned cartridges for a little while before they returned to the Switch. And for example, I have the Switch copy of Doom here, and we're going to take what is already a very small cartridge and take a look at it under the microscope. I have no idea what this is going to look like. So okay, so Doom cartridge in there, and let's take a look. 400 times zoom, and look at that. So we're on the M of Doom. Obviously, it's a smaller cartridge, so it's all a bit easier to sort of navigate. But in terms of everything, is a bit smaller. But it's interesting how the black on the Switch cartridge is so colourful. The RGB printing, I guess, again coming through, but that is intriguing. What does the red, I guess, of the Switch logo on the cartridge look like? Let's just take a look at that. Okay, far from uniform. A little bit of bleed as well on the Nintendo Switch logo. Cool. Okay. Then the 18, the Peggy logo. Very crisp, very clean. Interesting. Now the plastic on the Switch cartridge, what does that look like? That looks entirely different. It looks like much denser in terms of its surface. It's certainly not a textured so much as, well, it is textured obviously, but it's not so much of a textured surface. And we can see there the let's go up to the Nintendo logo on this. Interesting. So yeah, so the variation in terms of the plastic surface compared to the, I suppose, the quality of the plastic outcome, I'd say that the Switch plastic is probably the best quality plastic. It's certainly the densest plastic that we've seen, and that seems to be reflected in terms of the surface texture, the surface area that we're seeing. Interesting. Oh, and there we have a little fleck of something, a little red fleck just stuck in the plastic there. Is that, can I see that with the naked eye? No, I absolutely cannot see that with the naked eye. So, let me see it again. Where's it gone? There it is. Interesting. What could that be? Again, probably sort of microscopic plastic contamination. Cool. Okay. Okay, so that's Nintendo. Now I want to compare a couple of Megadrive cartridges, and then we'll move on from computer games. Don't worry, it's not just going to be computer games. But I've always been curious about the first and the third party cartridges for Megadrive. So we're going to compare Batman Returns and my favourite pinball game, Psycho Pinball. Let's start with the official Megadrive cartridge, as it were, the official and more common shape, I guess, that we get. And let's see. The plastic here. This is obviously the same sort of era as Nintendo SNES, SNES, and okay, this is the bottom of the cartridge, and yeah, I'd say it's similar to the SNES plastic actually, in terms of its pittedness, the patterns of the pitted. That's a tongue twister, isn't it? Let's take a look at the back actually, see if we can get a nice flat section. And can we just sort of focus that a little bit? Okay, so there we go. Yeah, it is similar to the SNES, I would say. Very similar. And if we go across to the Sega logo on the cartridge, we have a change in texture, and then we go Sega. Oh, that's cool. So Sega's upside down here. We're going into the E. And then the top of the G. In fact, actually, I would say that possibly, dare I say it, that this is a denser, maybe even higher quality plastic than the SNES cartridge. But I'm sure there will be people out there who will not be surprised by that possibility. But I guess, well, actually, no, sorry, that's not quite right, is it? So around the logo, it's very dense and flat. And then the rest of the cartridge, again, it's very similar to the SNES. But it's also very, very uniform. I'm not seeing much in the way of, again, plastic impurities, which is interesting. So, okay, let's take a look at the label. Take a look at the Megadrive logo. And, oh, yeah, similar to the Gameboy printing, I guess, actually, label printing. But again, it's quite a thin label on this Megadrive cartridge. We have that RGB, which is quite obvious. We have the, let's look at the metallic writing of Megadrive. So there's the G in Megadrive, and the E in Megadrive. Look at that! Look at those green flecks in the print. Interesting. Let's take a look at Batman's chin and his face. We're going up now onto his eye, I guess, and his cheek. There's his cheek, I think. That's his cheek. So that's his cheek to chin. No, sorry, his cowl cheek to face cheek transition. There we go. That's his nose. Let's have a look at Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman. Look at that lovely eye. Cool. So I think I'm just going to be looking at things microscopically all day, I think. Okay, so let's look. So Danny DeVito. Let's look at him in Penguin. There's his eye, and there's his penguiny nose. Okay, cool. And let's look at his mouth. 1,000 times zoom, shall we? So here we go. Oh, it's all blurry. There we go. Yeah, it's all that sort of RGB printing going on. Hard to keep in focus, but okay, right. So we go back up, and yeah, that's the penguin smile. And I want to look now at the third-party cartridge for Psycho Pinball, and yeah, I want to know what the differences are, if there are any. So, Psycho Pinball. Let's just focus that a bit more. I would say a slightly, well, certainly a different quality, a bit more fibrous in terms of the plastic. And I'd say a little less consistent in terms of the plastic. And I mean, look at that, that's an interesting inconsistency. Let's use my mouse to this wave of almost like a smudge in the plastic. That's interesting. Okay, keep on moving. Yeah, much more like looking at fiberglass or something, I think, this one. If we go to the Codemasters logo, let's start in the C of Codemasters. That's the top of the C. It's a fairly crisp logo moulding, though. Because by no means I would say is, for example, Codemasters cartridge inferior in quality. It's just different to the the Master System to the Megadrive Genesis cartridges that Sega were putting out. Cool. Okay. Now, are there any? Let's see. Are there any? What's this? Let's have a look at the little fleck of white just there. Is that something I can wipe off? Let's see. Yes. That was possibly like a fleck of dust or skin or something that was on the cartridge. But in terms of impurities, very little, I would say, that I can see. So possibly, compared to, say, Game Boy and SNES cartridges, the Mega Drive cartridges overall were just a bit better in terms of their plastic quality. Certainly fewer colour variation I can see in terms of the plastic and its impurities. So, game cartridges, I've always wanted to look at them, and now I have. Next, I want to compare it to a comic. We have Wolverine Weapon X, and this is a comic that's got some really great, fairly graphic artwork in it. I'm going to try and pick an image that's not too grim. It's kind of hard to do, actually. Tell you what, this one isn't so much grim as it's just intense. So there he is. There's Wolverine lying on the table, ready to be experimented on. Let's put this under the microscope. So I'm just going to put my mouse over here. Okay. So I'm going to put this microscope on Wolverine's face, shall we? Okay. Now, I'm particularly curious about comparing the quality of the print in terms of compared to, say, for example, the game logos, the labels that we've been looking at. So if we look at some of the wires on Logan's chest, for example, and they start to sort of, let's say there's a green one just here that should be fairly obvious. Where's it gone? Yeah, there's a green one. And it's funny actually how the print here, possibly because it's on paper, looks a bit more like we're looking at the plastic, the fibres of the plastic, especially, for example, on that last Mega Drive cartridge. Let's try and reposition myself there. The ink is not it's not sitting in discrete blobs like the black, for example, of the ink here. Seems to be much more part of the fibres, maybe soaked into the fibres, I guess. And I imagine it would do. Again, we're talking about paper, not plastic. But then again, the labels are paper on games, so that's interesting. But then, you can see elements of the RGB coming through, but I would say the quality here is comparable in some respects to the SNES cartridge. Much more discreet in its colour variance. Reds and yellows, blues, blacks, very little in the way. I mean, even, for example, with the green is a discrete green. It's not sort of floating into other elements of the print around it. So I found that quite interesting. Let's look at Logan's hand. There it is. Interesting. Okay, so that's how it compares to the labels, and I would say that the blacks in particular on the comic, especially on this particular type of comic paper, are behaving a bit differently compared to the computer game labels, which in itself is interesting. Okay, next, let's just go crazy, have some fun, and look at, let's say, a crisp. I really want to look at a Pringle through a microscope. So, obviously Pringles aren't flat, but we shall say crush the Pringle a little bit. There we go. So it sits flatly. And I probably actually just added crumbs to my mouse mat. In fact, let's look at some of the crumbs in the mouse mat. Can we see some of those crumbs? Oh, there's some crumbs from the Pringle. That's pretty cool. Okay. Yep. That's a big crumb just there. Yeah. But let's look at the crisp. Okay, so. No, oh, we're going to have to crunch this a little bit, aren't we? Okay. Cool. Wow. Okay. You can see, well, obviously it's got a completely different texture to the plastic. It looks much more like a I don't know. See if I can just focus a bit. Well, it looks almost like a blob of something that's been melted and then formed or allowed to cool, as it were. Especially if we look at the edges there. Interesting. Cool. Let's zoom in to 1000 on a Pringle. And wow, this is difficult. There we go. No, that is as good as we're gonna get. Probably because it's just a very uneven surface that we're looking at. But it seems similar at 1000 to what it does at 400. No, that's too close. Let's go back to 400. Okay, so a Pringle is not particularly exciting. I suppose there's that little black line there. There that my pointer is now pointing at. But apart from that, Next, we're going to look at Spider-Man, one of my favourite toys on the shelf behind me. And this is Spider-Man based on the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man. Let's start by looking at his leg, and you can see the texture of Spider-Man's suit there, almost like a honeycomb. That's quite cool. And yeah, to a certain extent, not surprising. That is an integral part of the design of this toy, and it's definitely apparent to the naked eye. Let's take a look at his stomach, and we can see the ridges, sort of silvery metallic ridges of Spider-Man's costume there. And oh, look where some of the paint job hasn't quite kept to the plastic. Can you see that with the naked eye? You can just about see that. Okay. But it's much more obvious here where the paint isn't on the plastic. That's cool. I like that. Take a look at his logo, shall we, on his chest. And okay. Again, the paint job microscopically looks quite messy. Look at that. That is quite a mess, isn't it? But to the naked eye, it's very passable. At his face, let's take a look at one of Spider-Man's eyes. There we go. Let's try and just focus that. Oh, this is very difficult. I need a Spider-Man clamp. Oh. Okay, so that's the side of his face. Again, you can see how the plastic and the moulding and the paint job isn't quite matching up. But on his eye, it's quite crisp. And I suppose that makes sense, actually. That's going to be one of the most important places to get right, would be the edge of the eye. And that's where people are sort of drawn to when they look at the figure. Blimey, it's really hard to keep in focus. Okay. But that silver, look at it, it's everywhere. Everywhere. Not remotely on the moulding, though. Cool. Okay. Now, the final object of the day is going to be this little fella. I've talked about him in a past video, and he is not so much a toy as he is a lifelong companion of mine. He's been with me since more or less the day I was born. So let's take a look at him, a little koala teddy bear. Let's start by looking at his eye, I reckon. So this is his eye, microscopically. I just need to just focus. Oh wow, that's been scratched up, hasn't it? That poor eye. Let's just, there we go. Blimey. Now we can see the light sort of reflecting through the surface of the eye to the plastic beyond. But look at that, it's almost like he's got a cornea. Poor guy. That's just because he's been so well loved and carried everywhere. He's a little bit beaten up. And at the edge of the eye, let's see if we can just focus on that a bit. Where sort of the colour comes in. You can see some microchips in the plastic. Oh wow, and the mould of the plastic there, and so the way that the colours sort of become part of the shape and the sort of sort of these little surface fractures on the plastic. Oh wow, you're a delicate fella, little man, without a doubt. Okay, so that's the eye of the of the koala. Let's take a look at his nose. Cute little nose. Here we go. And again, just need to focus. Oh wow, we can see the nostril shape on his little nose. This is inside sort of the nostril area. Cool. Lots of reflection happening. And again, it's really hard to stay in focus. But extremely scratched and scarred and textured, and 33 years of being carried around by me. Let's take a look at the back of his head, shall we? At the fabric, shall we? Let's see what that's like. I'm hoping it looks like a little landscape of loveliness. Oh, wow! Look at that! Look at that! Look at that colour variation. Got some red, blue, black, some green in there. Little bits of stuff. Wow. He doesn't necessarily look like a little landscape of comfy loveliness. He looks like he's probably got bits. He's probably picked up bits from everywhere he's ever sat. Oh, cool. Okay, hang on. Let's focus that. Blimey. Obviously, you know, the general colour is the colour that I would expect, but all these other bits, these sort of contaminations, blimey. Yeah, there's nowhere I can put the microscope where he hasn't got this random bits and just micro detritus hanging around in his fur. Oh dear. Poor guy. What about his ear? Let's have a look. No, there you go. There's even... Oh, that's a little bit better. Oh no, there you go. There's a black piece. Maybe a little less dirty than the rest of him. Wow. Little guy. Okay, and let's take a look at the label. This strap. Yeah, it used to be around my waist when I was in the incubator. I was very premature. I was born 13 weeks premature. But this thing, let's take a look at it, shall we? And let's take a look at I belong to. Let's look at that. That bit of writing. Bring it into focus. Cool. That's the L in belong, I think. That's the E. The writing is much less discreet on the paper than I thought it would be. Clearly the ink is sort of bleeding in and fading over time. But look at all that muck again on the label. Can we see? Yeah, it is sort of there. You can see that there's again, you know, it's hardly surprising. Let's look at the 2 in I belong to. Can we get there? There's the T, I think, and the O. Yeah. We can just about get there. Looks like I'm doing some sort of medical procedure on him, doesn't it? Poor guy. But yeah, isn't that interesting? I could look at stuff all day with this. I really could. Actually, okay, one more thing. Two more things, actually, that I've been curious about. A spoon. I've got the back of a spoon. Let's take a look at that. Oh, yeah, it looks like brushed metal. Cool. Doesn't surprise me, though. I guess with all the washing, the scrubbing, the scraping on teeth and food. That's really cool. Okay, so back of a spoon. And finally, honestly, for today, the final item I'm curious about is a mirror. I've got a mirror here. See if I can sort of just... No, I can't blind the camera. Oh no, a little bit there. A mirror. I really want to know what this looks like. Okay, so the mirror. Is it just going to freak out when it looks at the mirror? No. Actually, I thought there was a chance that it might just turn bright white. Just reflect the light back at the camera, but no, look at that, the mirror. The mirror is... Well, it's almost like looking at crystal. Like a crystal formation, isn't it? Well, I suppose glass is, in that sense, crystalline in its formation. Cool. And these are probably all tiny little micro scratches that have built up over the lifetime of the mirror. Will only get worse as time goes on, I guess. Interesting. I wonder if there are any... Oh, hang on. Wow, look at that. Is that actually a break in the glass? Or something like that? I mean, what is that? No, that's where essentially fingerprint grease, I guess, is touching the glass, and it's made the surface look very different just there. Interesting. And then we have got a little bit of reflection coming back off the mirror there, in terms of there's a little sort of hum of light floating around there. Cool. Should we look at this at 1,000 times zoom? I kind of want to. Here we go. Oh. Cool. Look at that. Oh, no, that is very hard to stay in focus on. There we go. Almost. Look at that. Isn't that cool? So yeah, very crystalline in that sense. Looks like we've sort of gone into Superman's Fortress of Solitude. Nice. Yep, I could look at things all day. Okay, one more thing. Let's look at this microphone here. I'm going to try and bring it into shot. Let's look at my Blue Yeti. So there we go. I want to look at this stuff here. Oh, look at that nasty. Look at all that grime. Oh, that would be all the puzz and the maybe some moustache hair getting stuck in there. Oh, that's horrible. Because often you have to get quite close to a microphone, especially when you're doing voiceover work. Oh, that's grim. Oh, loving it. You can see the shape of the grill and the grid, but that's just disgusting. Although it looks clean, from to be in my defence, that looks like a clean microscope, like a clean microphone. Sorry, but clearly, yeah, this saliva and dust and stuff. Oh, it's horrible. But I love it. I love it. Okay, I need to stop for now, but I am so... Oh, no, there's one more thing I was going to do. Sorry, one more thing. And that was a hair. I plucked a beard hair earlier. That's it, I want to look at that. So let's look at that, shall we? Beard hair. So I've got this white surface. I've got a hair just here, and let's take a look at this. Okay, so a hair. Oh, cool. Now the thing is, I've seen hairs in like forensic science sort of TV programs. one called Forensic Files that my wife and I watch all the time. But it's nice to see a hair for yourself microscopically. Should we zoom in on it like 1,000? Let's take a look. Is it one of my beard hairs? Oh, and oh, my beard hair has some sort of green contamination in it, or green thing sticking into it. Is that like a microscopic splinter into the hair? Who knows? I wonder if it's possible to turn up the light on that at all. Let's see if we can. Very delicate. That's down, up. And let's see if we can focus that just a little bit better. So hard to do without moving things around loads. There we go, that's probably as good as we're going to get. Isn't that cool? Wow. And I reckon if we looked at different parts of the hair, we might be able to see sort of where the hair maybe was breaking apart possibly. Let's look at the bottom of the hair. So that's the... Can we see it? Oh. Blimey, that is just so small. Okay. So, can we look at that? So you can see along the edge of the hair, little flecks are coming off it. It's starting to. That's at the bottom of the hair, like on a curl at the very end of the hair. That's just. Oh, that's so cool. That's so cool. Okay, right. Yes, we need to stop. We need to stop. But I'll just go back to the mouse mat for a bit while while we bring things to a close. I am very happy with this microscope, and I could look at things all day. I think I will look at things all day through it. But hopefully you guys have enjoyed this. If there's anything you want me to put this microscope on and look at, then I'm happy to see what the results are. I mean, actually, should we try my finger? Let's try my finger. Okay. Here's my finger. Let's see if we can. Oh, focus on the finger. Focus on the finger. Look at that. So that's about 1,000. You can see sort of ridge between the ridges on my finger. See little bits of dirt in there. Oh, cool. On the surface, and little flecks of skin. That's almost nasty. Okay, let's zoom out to 400, shall we? Let's see if that's a bit better. Cool. Stuff stuck to the finger. And that's, yeah, as far as we can go out. Nice. So yeah, so if you have an idea of something that I can put under this microscope, or something that I can point this microscope at, I would love to indulge those ideas. So please do comment below. Let me know what you want to see. In fact, everywhere I look, like I've got some melted candy cane from like a film project I did a little while ago. That could be cool to look at, you know. Games controllers, posters, books. There's just like the possibilities are endless. So yes, comment below. Let me know. And yeah, hopefully you've enjoyed this little experiment, because I really have. As ever, guys, until next time, do take care. Bye bye.